Febu? Febu sir?
Subin?
Yes. Kelkalo, alle?
Kelkam.
Okay. You are also visible and audible. 10 minutes. We will start in a couple of minutes.
Kuravila.
Okay. Abia? Adya, shall we start?
Yes, sir. So the second talk is on Cyprian Ekwensi by Mr. Febu George Mathai Kurichiyath, Assistant Professor, St. Thomas College, Kurichiyath. Now I ask Pooja to say a few words on Mr. Febu George.
Good morning, everyone. It is with immense pleasure that I welcome Mr. Febu George Mathai Kurichiyath, Assistant Professor at St. Thomas College, Kurichiyath, to our conference. He serves as a Senate member of Mahatma Gandhi University and is a former PG board member. He is the Joint Secretary of Ezhuthootam Pathanamthitta. He co-edited Pearls from the Deep along with C.B. James Sir, as well as the Common Course Test Gems of Imagination published by the Cambridge University Press. Febu Sir also co-edited the book titled Event, Memory and Literature, Trauma Narratives of the Indian Subcontinent. He has presented many seminars and talks on literature and cultural theory and has published articles and poems in English as well as Malayalam. Sir is currently doing his PhD at School of Letters, Mahatma Gandhi University. His latest poem titled Last Spell will soon be published in an upcoming poetry anthology. I welcome Mr. Febu George to give the talk on the Nigerian writer Cyprian Ekwensi.
Hello all, hope I'm audible. Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. You are audible.
Okay. At the outset, let me thank Subin and the Department of English of the Mahatma College for giving me such an opportunity, making me part of this. Let me also take the opportunity to thank Sherry of UC College, who had this whole idea. And I was not able to attend all the talks, but I can understand that from the way the responses that come in the group, I can understand that things are going in a very interesting fashion. Without much delay, let me enter my talk. Sivin gave me this topic on Cyprian Ekwensi. And it was a kind of learning session for me as well. And at the outset, let me tell you that I'm not any authority on Cyprian Ekwensi, but then I can just guide you to reading Ekwensi more and just help you locate him in world literature. I'll perhaps share the screen with you. A small PPT perhaps will help you understand things. Just a minute. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes, so I'll expand it. Is it expanded? Hope you can see it in full screen.
Yes. Very well.
So, Cyprian Ekwensi, I have titled it as Cyprian Ekwensi, Novels of the City. He's a prolific writer. He's written a lot. Children's literature, television scripts, short stories. He's even made movies. We'll not be able to cover everything. So, I just thought of his major focus. His major focus is on the city, Lagos, in Nigeria. He's a Nigerian author. We'll see more about him, his life, his works, and then we will come to the aspect of the city. Well, this is just a quote that I took from his People of the City, his famous novel, and it is the epigraph to part 1, how the city attracts all types and how the unwary must suffer from ignorance of its ways. This is the epigraph to part 1 in People of the City, which was published in 1954. I just took that as a quote because I'll explain that later. As I go on with my presentation, you'll be able to understand the dimensions of that particular statement. This is the life of Ekwensi in a nutshell. Was born on 26 September 1921. That's why we're discussing him in this fabulous 14. And he belongs to the Igbo tribe. He was born in Minna, the present capital of the Niger state. His father, David Anadumaka, was a famed storyteller and elephant hunter. And perhaps that inspired him towards creative writing. Ekwensi was a brilliant pupil at boarding school, Government College Ibadan, and became engrossed in Yoruba culture. Yoruba is a language that is speak. His school life and multi-ethnic upbringing were to be reflected in his work. After stints at various Nigerian and Ghanaian colleges, he worked as a forestry officer. In that wild and lonely environment, he began writing short adventure stories, some of which were published in 1947 as Ikolo the Wrestler and Other Igbo Tales. The same year, 5 of his works were published in England by Lutterworth Press as part of its African New Writing series. Another collection of light romance stories came out in 1948 from an Onitsha publisher in Nigeria. Onitsha is, I'll speak about Onitsha in detail, the place in Nigeria and its significance in literature. In 1949, Ekwensi began to read his stories on the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation while also writing for several Lagos newspapers. 2 years later, he won a scholarship to study pharmacy at London University. He said that it was while he was on the ship to England that he began to assemble people of the city, the famous novel, People of the City. Working as a pharmacy assistant at Old Church Hospital, Romford, Essex, he wrote plays that were broadcast by the BBC. He also recorded a voiceover for Man of Africa in 1953, which featured at the 1954 Venice Film Festival. Ekwensi's film scripts included Nigeria Greets the Queen, which tells about Queen making her first visit to Nigeria in 1956, British Queen. On his return to Nigeria that year, he worked for the Broadcasting Corporation, becoming Director of Information in 1961. 2 children's novellas, The Drummer Boy and The Passport of Malamilia, were published in 1960, and the novel Jaguanana and the equally successful collection of Winnett's Burning Grass in 1961. From 1961 to 1966, Ekwensi published at least one major work each year. Jaguanana, the story of a high-class Lagos prostitute, was vehemently attacked by the Catholic and Anglican churches for its sexually explicit language and was banned in several schools. An application to film the book was rejected by the Nigerian parliament. But then came the international prize, the Dag Amsjold Prize. When the Nigerian Civil War broke out in 1966, Ekwensi became an advisor to Odumegwu Ojukwu, secessionist leader, chairing Biafra's External Publicity Bureau. After the war, he resumed his literary and pharmaceutical career. He helped form the Association of Nigerian Authors in 1981, and in 2001 was made a member of the Order of the Federal Republic. 4 years later, he was inducted into the Nigerian Academy of Arts. And he would say that 5 decades or more of writing have brought me world fame, but not fortune, he said in an interview. If I were an American living in America or Europe, I would be floating in a foam bath in my own private yacht off the coast of Florida. So in the sense that through writings, he didn't gain much fortune, but he didn't even gain much world fame. If it would have been in America, it would have been different. So the context of Nigeria is also important. We know plenty of writers from Nigeria, say Chinua Achebe, Adichie, a lot of writers, a lot of Okara, a lot of famous, writers, plenty of writers in, Nigeria. Now, the Achebe's Things Fall Apart comes much later. He had published much before that. Cyprian Ekwensi started writing much before that. I'll come to his literature and say other things. Let me share an instance, a memory instance with you of Cyprian Ekwensi. As it is said in the PPT, that he died on 4th November 2007 in Enugu due to an undisclosed ailment. And in the Nigerian Tribune, then it was written like this: but what will Ekwensi be remembered for in Igbo land? To Onuzlike Orji, an Enugu-based journalist, the death was a personal loss as he was his role model. He said, here was somebody who did not study writing or journalism, coming from the blues and beating even the best that there was. He was trained in pharmacy. He came into writing and wrote world-class novels. In the primary and secondary schools, I was exposed to some of his books, including The Drummer Boy, Jaguar Nana, and The African Night Entertainment, among others. I found every one of them informative and entertaining. I never knew I was going to meet him in real life until sometime in 1998, when one of his sons was killed by soldiers around Onitsha, Anambra State. Working on the story, I interviewed him, his comportment, humility, and mastery of sorrow in the face of provocation stunned me. I fell in love with him instantly. At this particular aspect, a lot of followers. He was a writer in the minds of a lot of youngsters in Africa, in Nigeria especially. Although it is un-African to speak ill of the dead, nobody would have spoken bad of the late writer, as people interviewed expressed shock and paid glowing tributes to Ekwensi, the father of Nigerian literature. This is a tribute by the Nigerian Tribute just close after his death in 2007. And for his he had a befitting burial given by the community. There were differences in the Igbo community at that point of time. There were warring factions. They all came together to attend his funeral ceremony. They all loved him much. But this is the set of works that he has written, starting with When Love Whispers in 1948, which is set in the city of Onitsha. And then it moves on. Maybe today what I will discuss is perhaps his over till, say, 1963. And the nature of these novels. And some of these novels are famous novels. When Love Whispers in 1948, then African Nights Entertainment in 1948. It goes on like that. People of the City, The Drummer Boy, Passport of Malamilia, Jaguanana, Burning Grass, and African Nights Entertainment, Beautiful Feathers. It goes on like that, and until Cash on Delivery, the short story collection. I would be focusing on, say, these blockbuster literary novels. Well, I perhaps coined this blockbuster literary novels. I'll give you an explanation for that. These are the three novels perhaps we're going to discuss today. People of the City, Jaguanana, Beautiful Feathers. We would call hit films in Malayalam, blockbuster movies, here we say. It is just like that. These novels were so popular. At the same time, they were literary. They were changing certain trends, especially when the colonial models were there. The Eurocentric models of fiction were there. Ekwensi's novels, along with, say, Achibi and others, they were setting a kind of difference to the Eurocentric novels. So they were literary, they were popular, and at the same time, there was a change in trend that was embraced. So we will see that. Maybe I'll start by telling about his children's fiction. We can say that he wrote such children's novels as Drummer Boy, Passport of Malamilia, and African Nights Entertainment. Say, at that point of time, the major children's novelists would be Chinua Ekwensi, and Nebel Seguin. If you look at their children's literary work, say children's works would mean that it is written by adults. There is a contradiction there. It is written by adults. And if you take the colonized, metaphor or trope, the child is the colonized and the adult is the colonizer. As Roland Barthes would discuss this in his Toys, the French toys are is imposed on the children. The ways of the adult ways are imposed on the children. So most children's work till Ekwensi, they were they regulated children. They didn't give the children to construct their self. The self was constructed and given to them. Say, you should follow these. They were highly didactic in nature. Whereas Ekwensi's works, these works, they were not self-regulating. They gave a space for children to read and understand and construct their selves. And of course, he would take the African situation into consideration. Drummer Boy speaks of a blind beggar singer, Kokoro, based on a true life instance. And he speaks of the wanderings and the kind of helplessness of this artist. Passport of Malamilia speaks about death, and African Nights Entertainment speaks about vengeance. And the important thing is that we cannot consider them as properly children's literature. Maybe Achebis and Mabel Sigans, they build more of a national consciousness. They build more of an identity away from the colonial identity. But Ekwensi, of course, speaks about an identity away from the colonial, but the colonial is still there. The colonial influences are still traced. But the thing is that they are not properly children's works. They are what is called the crossover literature. They cross over from children's stage, childhood stage to adult. So that crossover is properly mentioned. And so in certain circles, children are not allowed to read these works because they provoke a lot. They provoke a lot of questions about your identity, about changing your identity. So this is just a short note that I would like to give you about his children's literature. Coming to these novels, blockbuster literary novels, People of the City, Jaguar Nana, Beautiful Feathers. Before I go into the details of these novels, let me give you a background. Okay? This is about Onitsha market literature. There is something called Onitsha market literature. And if you look into that, say 1950s in Nigeria, 1940s, 1950s in Nigeria, and 1960s, a lot of publication of novels were there. A lot of novels, different kinds of novels in Nigeria itself. Say, there was a vast reading public in Nigeria, a large body of literature not properly acknowledged. And earlier we saw that a journalist, while Ekwensi died, at his death, he remembers having read Ekwensi's novels, including Jaguar Nana, during his school days. So children, school children used to read novels a lot. Most people leave school after 6 to 8 years with enough knowledge to be interested in reading novels in, say, 1940s, 50s, 60s, Nigeria. The environment the novels spoke were familiar to the people. So, as you know, Amos Chitola, he published the Palm Wine Drinkard in 1952. And that is perhaps the first Nigerian novel to get international acclaim. Then Ekwensi publishes 1954 novel People of the City, and that is another thing that attained international acclaim. Certain people would consider 1954 Ekwensi novel as the first Nigerian novel to attain international acclaim, but it is not so. Chitola had published his novel in 1952. In 1940s, say, what came to the Nigerian publication industry or literature was cheap Indian novelettes with romantic pictures of glamorous women kissed by heroic men on the covers. And it is at this time that Nigerians started supplying their own material to literature. So one of the first titles to appear was Ekwensi's When Love Whispers in 1947, published by Tabansi Bookshop in Onitsha. Now, Onitsha is an industrial hub, commercial hub. Lots of different people come there, throng there. And book publishers, there are plenty of book publishers there, and they publish anything. And they publish a lot of books, any kind of books. They don't look at the merit of the books. Often the works published, the editors in these publishing agencies, the people who work there, they don't know proper spelling, proper English. So there'll be a lot of mistakes. Even authors themselves make mistakes. And so this formulates a kind of English that was there, the pidgin, and then to the Creole. So a lot of works came out, a lot of publishing of novels. And the interesting thing is that if you look at these novels, the publishing dates are not given because people want new novels. So if a novel goes for 1 year, and if the date is not given, perhaps people who take the novel can understand that this is a fresh novel, this is not 1 year old, and they will buy. So they always want fresh novels. Books are not reprinted because they would be out of date. When the readers finished with a book, they used it for toilet paper or rolled their tobacco in it to make cigarettes or just threw it away. And so any research about these novels are not possible because they're just thrown away. And bulk of this production is concentrated in Odisha because there are a large number of students in Odisha. And Odisha has the biggest market. And so students and market traders make up the largest audience for this type of literature. So this is the background to the beginning of the writing of Cyprian Ekwensi. When he himself contributed to this market literature, popular literature, with his first novel, When Love Whispers, in 1947, and People of the City is perhaps the magnum opus in that Onitsha tradition of market literature, where you can say that it is a kind of chapbook that he always aimed at. Of course, at this point of time, there was also a movement against the tendencies in these novels. Like a lot of, there was open and frank narrations of sex, violence, intrigues, plots, political deceits. So there was a kind of tendency of opposition and resistance to these as well. So lots of pamphlets came out against these novels. There were movements against these novels. Even authors decided not to publish novels which included such open accounts of sex, violence, etc. And so you can see that trend as well in Ekwensi. Ekwensi's novels are not just open accounts of sex and violence, but melodrama, but say they also contain didactic elements, like the quote that we just read, how the city attracts all types and how the unwary must suffer from ignorance of its ways. So the didactic teaching approach is also there. Oral aesthetics of Africa has of course exerted an influence on people of the city. Its vaguely didactic conception in tone and phrasing of the epigraphs. This epigraph, how the city attracts, then when all doors are closed, for the second chapter, second part, he has given that epigraph. So that oral literature, its didactic values, that has been implicit in these epigraphs. But at the same time, didacticism is there only on the surface. It is there only on the surface, and inside you can see Ekwensi manipulating the plot, at least for the resolution part. He manipulates the plot. So People of the City set the pattern of fiction, Ekwensi's fiction, up to the Nigeria-Biafra War until 1967 to 70. Its affinities are not with the mainstream African Europhone novel of the 1950s and 1960s, but with the chapbook tradition known as Onitsha market literature. So the chapbook tradition would mean chapbook is something, a compilation of different things. Might have a common theme, but need not be a common theme at all. It's a compilation of different elements together. So these, the People of the City and other works of Ekwensi and the literature of the time would be a compilation of different elements together. The city is not a harmonious whole, though there is a longing for harmony of the rural side in Ekwensi. City, as you know, is not a place of harmony. And he presents this, actually, this confusion he presents. This anarchy of the city is what Ekwensi tries to present. But from the Nigerian point of view, of course, not from completely from the colonial point of view. The People of the City, 1954, appeared 4 years before Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. It was one of the early Nigerian work to gain international acclaim. Yeah, we all discussed that. People of the City tells the story of a young crime reporter who doubles as a band leader in a large West African city. As one British critic wrote, the novel said more about West Africa than 50 government reports. However, Ireland banned the novel on the grounds of indecency. Controversy was to dog Ekwensi's literary career. And it is set in a nameless city it is either Onitsha or Lagos in Nigeria. Most of his novels are set in Lagos. Maybe you can read the story of people of the city. If I'm going to discuss that in detail, perhaps will not have much time. But still, maybe if you want, I can try. But then it will be boring for you if I go through the whole story as such. People of the City was the first extended piece of fiction of Ekwensi. The chief character and narrator of the novel is Amusa Sango, an ambitious journalist and leader of a popular band in Lagos. So in delineating Sango's character, Ekwensi states rather than shows the concerns of the bachelor who recognize that beneath his gay exterior lay nature serious and determined to carve for itself a place of renown in the city of opportunities. He is a crime reporter, Sango, Amusa Sango. Sango is a vehicle for the presentation of the callousness of Lagos and its toll in human lives. The strength of such a vehicle is the strength of a roving camera, catching incidents many and varied. Ekwensi, but initially Sango is idealistic, presented as idealistic before the convergence of the city's deadly pressures. After a brush with the police, he questions his fading hopes for the good life. What had he achieved? What was he going? Where was he going? Was it drifting like others, or had he a direction? I'm quoting from Ekwensi. Okay, whatever the direction was, he did not feel at this that he was progressing along it. Certainly, his mother would not be proud to see how he was making out. Crime reporter for the West African sensation, leader of a band in a nightclub. The old woman would think he was lost, his mother. As far as the money was concerned, there was little of it being put aside for the rainy day. And then there were the girls, everyone with her own problems, and thrice as interesting as the last. Something must have happened to his noble resolutions. So there follows a good deal more introspection before Sango is evicted from his apartment by his ruthless landlord, Lajide. Lajide also happens to own the club in which Sango plays, and annoyed by Sango's support of an opposition political party, he substitutes another band. Sango drops to occasional work as a stand-in musician. To make matters worse, he loses his job as reporter. During this period, when he is scouring the city alone, Sango meets Beatrice II. Earlier, a far more sophisticated, though tragic, woman of the city was introduced. Her name too is Beatrice. That is why this Beatrice is Beatrice II. So his aspirations, Sango's aspirations are reawakened when he meets Beatrice II. There is a girl for you, I'm quoting from Ekwensi. There is a girl for you, Sango. If you could win her, you would find a foothold in the city and all your desires would focus on a new inspiration. How different she is from the mom, Aina, Elena, Beatrice I. Have you ever felt anything like this beautiful feeling before? So, though her parents do not approve of Sango at first, and though Beatrice is engaged to a medical student, the meeting is not completely hopeless. In a series of quick incidents, her fiancé commits suicide after flunking his examination, and her parents' class aspirations wither at the prospect of an unmarried daughter. Amusa marries Beatrice, and they leave for the Gold Coast to gain a solid footing before presumably returning to Nigeria in the distant future. And we can see many characters are introduced. All see the magic glitter of Lagos. They all see the magic glitter of the city. At most, die senselessly to achieve a neat sense of closure in the novel. The novel does not have much depth in its treatments, but Ekwensi was certainly to rise to the occasion in his rendition of, another character, Jaguanana, later on. So, People of the City, we can see some of the major features of the city novels of this time. Along with Molotutula's Mythopoetic, The Palm and Ringard, some of the common features shared are the romantic intrigues, the manipulation of plot to achieve desired resolutions, and of course, use of Eurocentric color and name symbolism in characterization are common features. So, Beatrice too is considered as someone who is better. And all those characters, women characters who deceived him, their blackness is brought out, their color is black, and so they are villainous. This European tradition of depicting the blacks at that point of time in Heart of Darkness and all, that is satirically portrayed here, or that is all the more made conscious to us. So there is a subtle subversion of the European norms, a kind of criticism of European view of the Orient. So we'll move on to perhaps the next novel, Jaguanana. So Jaguanana was published in 1961. Considered by many as his best work, the novel portrays a confusing new world in which Freddie's desire for education, a character in it, or the attractions of village life fade before Jaguar's seductive, ambitious presence. This account of the seamy side of Lagos and of Jaguar's restless, doomed refusal to grow old is a classic of African fiction and one of the first in a long line of West African novels about the city. Jaguanana would actually come as his seventh published work. It is an extremely, speaks about Jaguanana, who is an extremely sensuous woman who thrives on the nightlife of Lagos and specifically on the Tropicana Club. When the novel opens, she is 45 years of age and quite aware that she is aging. She desires a young man as both husband and lover, and she finds a young man in Freddie Neng, a student who is both ambitious and poor. Through prostitution, she can support Freddie and offers to support him through a British university. Yet her age and the fact that she is ambitious along different lines from Freddie's pose problems. And I quote from the novel. She knew Freddie deserved a good girl to marry him, raise his children, and shadow him in all his ambitions. But Jago was too much in love with him to make a reasonable exit. And she wanted Freddie as a husband because only a young man would still be strong enough to work and earn when she would be on the decline. Men would not be wanting her in 6 years' time, when even now girls of 18 could be had. At 45, she had her figure and her tact to guide her. Let me ask you, hope you are listening to me. I can't hear you, so I'm just speaking to myself. It's like that. Hope you can hear me still.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I'm just speaking about Jaguanana here, his controversial novel. So at 45, she had a figure and a tact to guide her. So I say Jaguanana was read by students at school. I'm thinking of the days of my younger days. I don't know how youngsters are now. So if I have to read a novel like that, which is explicit in its content of sensuality, then I'll have to read it in a very private fashion, without anybody seeing, without my parents seeing, without anyone seeing. I still remember even reading Dharma Puranam, Vijayan's Dharma Puranam, in a very secretive fashion. I don't know about the days now. But here in Africa, when he writes this, he wants all to read this and understand the complexities of the characters in the city. Let's move through Jaguanana. However, to Freddie's grief, she cannot give up the Tropicana Club and the wealthy men she meets there. By the time he prepares to depart for his studies in England, he meets the younger Nancy Old. Jaguar's awareness of their meeting and their growing relationship sows the seeds of jealousy deep within her. And it is only Freddie's departure that prevents their bursting into fury. While Freddie is away, Jaguar decides to leave the city to visit her parents, as well as the parents of Freddie. She learns that her family has left Ogabu for a trip, and she travels on to Freddie's home. There, she is able to settle a family dispute over land. This particular episode raises Jaguar Nana to a near mythic level. For the awe for the villagers and her insight into the nature of men combine effectively to produce a certain irony. She then plunges back into Lagos and meets Dennis, who is about the same age as Freddie and who would be about the same age as his son once born to her. That son died, and so too will both of her young lovers. They will also die. Dennis's wildness reminds her of her own, and she tries to warn him of impending trouble. Jaguar Nana later meets the shrewd politician Uncle Taiwo. At this time, Freddie returns from England, now married to Nancy. He decides to run for the same political office as Taiwo. Deeply hurt by the news of his marriage, Jaguar tries to seduce him as an act of vengeance. She fails and contains a growing anger until, in an argument with Nancy, a most vulnerable point is hit, her childlessness. The irony is obvious here, for Jaguar saved Nancy's life earlier while both were in the village of Freddie's parents. Jaguar then resolves to break up Freddie's home, and she teams up with Uncle Taiwo to help defeat Freddie. Ekwensi leads us through the maze of bribery and deceit in exposing much of Lagos politics. Freddie is eventually assassinated, as is Taiwo, who loses the election in spite of his manipulations. Dennis is hanged and Jaguar flees into the slums at the edge of the city. Her brother then appears and persuades her to return home to console their dying father. Jaguar returns and decides to stay. So Jaguar Nana is no simple vehicle for convention, no moving camera as in People of the City, no mirror. She is the fullest character thus far rendered in the fiction of Ekwensi. There is a synthesis of different elements in Jaguar. Jaguar includes much of the vibrant Aina in the first novel, though the development is fuller. Jaguar cannot be passed off as the prostitute with the golden heart. She is much more than that. She is a woman. She is at times ruthless. At other times, she is exquisitely gentle, melting the hearts of aging village kings and ruthless political barons of the city. The synthesis Ekwensi achieves holds true for other characterizations as well in the novel. Freddie Neme is as ambitious as Amusa Sango in People of the City. And the women they both marry are women who are familiar with the ways of the city, yet uncorrupted by them. Lajide and Uncle Taiwo are quite close as men of power, and their actions reflect the identical brutality of Lagos politics. So that is Jaguar Nana. But I would like to quote a few more statements, passages from Jaguar Nana. For you see, Jaguar is not destroyed by Lagos. She does suffer the loss of two young lovers and the loss of her idealism. Thus, when she is called home, she is not eager to return to Lagos. In her village, she attains a newfound sense of freedom and serenity. Ekwensi's rhetoric changes drastically as the scenes unfold. Jaguar, the seasoned woman of the city, achieves spiritual and physical harmony with the forest. She was singing gently now and enjoying the very, I'm quoting from the novel, she was singing gently now and enjoying the very rare luxury of being free. This was what the city woman meant when she told her friends, I'm going home. No men ran after her in Ogabu. None of them imbued her with unnecessary importance. Here she was known, but known as someone who lived with them and grew up with them. She was not known as a glamourite, someone to be hungered after for sheer diversion. How many years now since she had time to look up at the night and see the moon? In Lagos, the street lights were so bright that no one ever really saw the moon. In Lagos, the streetlights were so bright that no one ever really saw the moon. She surrendered herself to the idleness and voluptuous feeling of lace. The hard earth bruised her body with all the fervor of an ardent lover. She was too lazy to care and too deeply asleep to feel anything. So the effects of the city and the effects of the rural side on Jaguanana is beautifully expressed by Ekwensi. We will see the next novel as well in the meanwhile, and some observations, and I'll wind up. Beautiful Feathers was published in 1963, and Wilson Yari, the leader of the Nigerian movement for African and Malagasy solidarity, commands the respect of the masses. He is the hero. With the leaders of African thought, his name has significance. But inside his home, he has no authority. He is disregarded, then deserted by his own wife. While he pursues his desire for African and Malagasy solidarity, his home life is crumbling, and he cannot concentrate on running his business, the Independence Pharmacy. Wilson does not come to terms with himself until he discovers that the unity is a complex of the judicious and the proper, the overlooked and the forgotten, the tolerated and the rejected. Ekwensi concerns here, it is more, the concerns in this novel is more broader, and the irony he gains is much more direct. He focuses on a pharmacist, Wilson Yari, and the basis for all his actions is Pan-Africanism and his culminating desire for the achievement of solidarity. More will seem to be at stake here than in the previous two novels. Ekwensi emphasizes the decay at work in society by making the wife of Wilson unfaithful to him. The title is derived from an Igbo proverb: a white fowl is beautiful only in its feathers. Once plucked, you are left with something commonplace. So knowledge of his wife's infidelity stabs at Yari throughout the novel. And in the passage below, the proverb is placed in context. I quote from the novel: solidarity, where does it begin? Here in my own home, I am the leader of the Nigerian movement for African and Malagasy solidarity. Wilson Yari, good looking, famous outside. At home, I am nothing. I am like a fowl with beautiful feathers on the outside for all to see. When the feathers are removed, the flesh and bones underneath are the same as for any other fowl. I am not really different from other men. In fact, if only they knew how I am spited in my own home, they would despise me. They would never again listen to me talking about solidarity. So this is a protagonist speaking. Ekwensi then has posed two central problems in this novel. The first is a political question. How should an African nation state attempt to implement the concept of continental unity? The second problem is aggravated by the first. How is it possible that a man who is working for and stands as a symbol of African solidarity cannot achieve the same solidarity in a much smaller unit, that of his family? So Wilson Yari persists in his work despite his dilemma and heads a growing group of idealistic young men. His group seizes every opportunity to attempt to demonstrate the need for solidarity. The group is neutral in the sense that the unity will not be imposed by any one country. Their demands on the local front are climaxed by a protest march which erupts into a riot. As a result of the march, however, Wilson Yari is summoned by Prime Minister to represent Nigeria at the conference on African unity. The Prime Minister is in sympathy with the goals of Yari's group, though curiously quiet about his position. In the meantime, Yari's wife has left him, taking the 3 children with her to the home of her father. Before they reach the village, Yari's oldest son, Lumumba, contracts a sickness, is treated in Benin, and dies in the village. In confusion after her grief, Yania returns alone to Lagos, seeking in a vague way to call out to Wilson from the labyrinth of the city. Wilson has pursued her to the village, though he arrives after she has left. Wilson proceeds to the conference where substantial resolutions are made. An allegory ensues in which Ekwensi proves the difficulty of implementing those resolutions. Though the possibilities of this prose experiment are exciting in Ekwensi, its dramatic effect seems weakened by its briefness and isolation in the context of the novel. A problem of timing is there, of course. The only other allegorical element previously evident has been Old Man Forrest, Annia's father, and his description seems only loosely tied to the novel. At any rate, Wilson returns and is saved from murder by his wife. She is seriously wounded, and the novel ends with her recovery. So Wilson's forgiveness and the suggestion that the sentiments of Pan-Africanism must prevail. So these are the novels of the city. What are the combination of forces that drives the characters of the city to come together? And what vision of good life is there? Where does Ekwensi locate the redeeming features of the city? And what juxtaposition of metaphors demonstrate this? You can probe into them. Ekwensi suggests that the women are generally attracted by the glitter of the fast life of the city, and that most have been restricted too severely by the provincial modes of home. The following passage relates the desires of Aina, and I quote, "It was a way of life she liked. The glamorous surroundings, the taxis, the quick drinks." So this is about the city. This was one reason why she had come to the city from a home 60 miles away, to ride in taxis, eat in fashionable hotels, to wear the aso ebi, that dress that was so often and so ruinously prescribed like a uniform for mourning, wakings, bazaars, to have men who wore white collars to their jobs as lovers, men who could spend. So this was what the women was attracted to. Proving to be more tragic is Beatrice the First in People of the City, who attracts all the important men of Lagos. She is stricken by an illness which erodes her physical appearance, leaving her a shell of a woman. Just before her death, she seeks the emotional support of Kofi, a lorry driver. But that act proves too late for the state of the decay. At her peak, she is able to explain to Amuso Sango, the protagonist of People of the City, her motive and method of getting ahead. Beatrice had disclosed that she came to the city from the Eastern Greens, from the city of the poor. She made no secret of what brought her to the city. High life. That is what she aimed at. Cars, servants. I'm quoting from Ekwensi here. Cars, servants, high-class foods, decent clothes, luxurious living. Since she could not earn the life herself, she must obtain it by attachment to someone who could. But she was not so well, and having found Grunnings who did not quite satisfy her, she had to stick to him. So you can see throughout the characters, the minor characters interweave their warning of doom. Their voices fuse into a chant which proves too feeble to dissuade the frantic quest of the major characters. Beatrice the First wastes away and is buried in a pauper's grave. Aina's vitality is drained away from her experiences, and near the end of the novel, she can be described in terms which contrast sharply with those in the earlier pages. She was smiling, still pale. Her coming here showed that she was a good sport, a good loser. Perhaps life had taught her that. Perhaps she'd still hoped. Obviously, the women in the People of the City are tragic victims in their quest toward the mirage of glamour. Bored with her early life as wife to a rural businessman, Jaguanana yearns for excitement and fulfillment. The idea of fleeing from a stifling life blossoms when she happens into the village railway station and asks for a timetable. I'll read that passage, it's very interesting. A young man smilingly told her when the next train would be leaving for Lagos to Jaguanana. Lagos, the magic name. She had heard of Lagos where the girls were glossy, worked in offices like men, danced, smoked, wore high-heeled shoes and narrow slacks, and were free and fast in their favors. She heard that the people in Lagos did not have to go to bed at 8 o'clock. Anyone who cared could go roaming the streets or wandering from one night spot to the other right till morning. The night spots were never shut and they were open all night and every night, not like here, where at 8 p.m. latest, everywhere was shut down and the streets deserted, so that it looked odd to be wandering about. We know in our situations, in our villages, in the remote regions here, in the rural side, and even in the towns, things come to a standstill until after 9 or 10. But not in big cities. So in Lagos, it is not like that. And so this is the attraction of Jaguar Nana moving to the city. I'm just giving you some of the glimpses of the city found in Ekwensi. Though Jaguar is not destroyed by Lagos, she does suffer the loss of 2 young lovers and the loss of her idealism. You can see that she is called home. She's not eager to return to Lagos. In a village, she attains a newfound sense of freedom and serenity. So this kind of balance between the rural serenity and the anarchy of the city, the continuous changes that happen in the city, the balance is not brought about in the novels of Ekwensi. And in fact, there is a kind of different elements juxtaposed together. The serenity of the rural side, the deceits, the violence, the kind of lustfulness in the city, all these are juxtaposed together and no balance is reached. They all presented as such. And of course, this was a move away from the Eurocentric novels, and that is where his significance arises. So Ekwensi, he received Dag Hammarskjöld International Prize in Literature. He became a fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Letters in 2006. But then, more importantly, what you can see is more than our awards. He lives in the hearts of readers. Igbo, Nigerian, Yoruba, and readers across the world would perhaps remember him as a great writer who inspired later writings involving the myriad complexities of the urban and the unreformed, the reforming. He speaks about the unreformed, the marginalized, the thieves, the prostitutes, and their position in the city, the way they develop, the way they imbibe new cultures. So he always speaks about the forming selves of the marginalized in his novels and in his works. I was just focusing on 3 novels to give you an idea of the city life that he has actually, portrayed. Ekwensi himself has said that, well, I am a writer of the masses. In an interview, he has said that, I am a writer of the masses. Of course, there are literary elements, but I am a writer of the masses. And so, more than the awards that he received, it is perhaps the place that we have given for him in our hearts. That would be the best award for him. Well, I stop my presentation here. Thank you for giving me an opportunity like this. Hope you will read more about Cyprian Ekwensi. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, if the participants want to ask any questions, they can ask them.
Hey, Febu, thank you for introducing Ekwensi.
Yeah.
It was well crisp, and we had traveled through the novels actually. It was good that you talked about the novels.
Yeah, he has written a lot, so it's not easy to cover everything. So I thought I would just focus on the city novels.
Yeah.
Novels, which is actually his major concern. City is his major concern. especially in the after colonial, after freedom from colonization, the developments, the progress that happens in cities are of great importance to this writer. So how the Africans and Nigerians develop, how they grow, that is what he focuses at. But of course, he doesn't present them in good light. He presents them in all the deceits that they undergo, in all the troubles that they undergo.
My question, I have a, when you made the introductory part, you made a statement that when they write there, you make mistake in English.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And it was not uploaded. But I would like to place such a language or violence done on language as in Empire Writes Back.
Yeah.
They talk about an abrogation.
Yeah.
Violence done on language as a form of resistance. So here, especially Amos Tutuwala, when he wrote palm wine drinkard, not drunkard, yes. Drinkard, and made a lot of mistakes with regard to spelling, with regard to grammar, yes. That is the way of resistance. That's their politics.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. In fact, we have this tradition still being followed, not by way of making spelling mistakes, but see, if you take God of Small Things, you have a lot of Malayalam words in it. If you take Salman Rushdie, again, there are a lot of words from Urdu. What Rushdie calls as chutnification of language. This is a kind of resistance towards this standard, colonial language. In Achibi, you can see this. Achibi actually, in Things Fall Apart, has made the language his own, English his own. So a lot of Igbo words are there. In all these novels, we can find that, of course, as Subin said, it is a strong resistance to the colonial standards being imposed on the colonizers. Yeah, right. We can trace a lot of examples in a lot of post-colonial novels. Nice observation. Hope my talk will help students to start reading Cyprian Ekwensi. This was actually the intention of the seminar, I suppose, Subin's intention. So you can start reading his novels. I said school children in Africa used to read him. So you have passed that stage even so. It's high time you read Cyprian Ekwensi. Okay, it was nice. And also, when you study post-colonial fiction in Africa, you can just start reading with Ekwensi and others. I said about Onitsha market literature, the influence that it had on Ekwensi. There are a lot of other influence. Okay, even Indian movies are there that has influenced it. So a lot of influences are there. And read The Drummer Boy, which is actually a true life instance on, a fictionalized instance on Kukuru. So you can just type Kukuru in the net and see his songs, the way he is. There are different documentaries on him. You can see the life in Nigeria. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for such a wonderful talk on Cyprian Ekwensi. It was interesting to learn how the didactic elements and oral aesthetics of Africa found its way in his People of the City. It was also nice to learn about the chapbook tradition and how he tried to subvert the European norms. It was a very informative talk on Ekwensi's city novels. So thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Subin, and thank you, students of the department and from elsewhere. Thank you for listening to me patiently. Subin, okay? Thank you.
We'll have a lunch break now and join back at 1:30 for the next talk.
പ്രിയ ടീച്ചറെ, ഇനി നമുക്ക് 1:30 അടുത്ത സെഷൻ തുടങ്ങുന്നത്. 1:30